What is going on, everyone? Today's Friday. No trades today, as you can see. Nothing really that I liked to see today. Everything looked pretty awful, if I'm being honest. There's this tiny short opportunity right here, but I think I'm just going to let it run. Um, the risk is way too high on it. I would have rather seen the inverse happen somewhere there. And maybe we would run to this low or this low or yeah, this low around 28,000 maybe. But I think I'll just let it play. If it plays, it plays. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Yeah, that's about it. Today was pretty not that great. I'll go into the replay of today just real quick. So obviously we see that New York AM opens higher, and then we take out the London high while ES fails to do so. However, ES took out the Asia low and London low, making an SMT down there, and we have a lot of bullish order flow, so I don't expect us to move lower, right? We tap into this 1 hour right here from way back when. It's actually not that far long ago. Is from just a few days ago, and we tap into this 1 hour and we just sell off after sweeping out this kind of internal high on the 1 hour. Honestly, this trade isn't that bad. It's not that bad of a trade. We get that 1 minute change. I just would have preferred to see some major liquidity get swept before we sell off. Like this high right here, I would have rather seen that get swept, right? And looking on the higher time frames, again, we have this 4 hour gap right here that I was eyeing, and I wanted to see what price would do at this 4 hour. I wanted to see if we did short, obviously we melted off, but I want to see what will happen when we get to this 4 hour, because I want a long. I'm more long bias. Even after this sell off, I'm still more long bias. So what do we see happen? We tap into this 4 hour, we get this 1 minute change in the state of delivery, a nice fat rejection out of this 4 hour. However, we tap into this 5 minute and we start to move lower. The reason I didn't short this is because my next draw for lower is 28,000, which is the low right here from yesterday. And I didn't expect another 350 point move after dumping 400 points already. And for that reason, I did not take this short. And also 10 a.m. was about to open, and I really wanted to see this 15-minute gap get tapped into, or I wanted to see a manipulation of these highs with 10 a.m. opening. But 10 a.m. opens, there was news, and it doesn't manipulate whatsoever, and we just continue to sell off. Now, we do end up putting in a nice little breaker formation that does end up holding, and I really wanted to take this to the 30 minute to look for a potential short, right? This 30 minute right here. The 4 hour is still in the back of my mind. Are we going to respect the 4 hour? Are we not going to respect the 4 hour? What's going to happen? I'm interested in seeing that. So we start to reject back for higher. When you look at the hourly, the wick is only getting bigger on the hourly, right? We are only making a bigger wick on the hourly. We continue moving higher. I'm really expecting this 30-minute short opportunity to be, solid. However, we don't get that at all. ES taps into a 5 minute right here. However, we already swept into the 30-minute gap. So now we have an SMT at these highs, and you could potentially take this lower since we technically tapped into the 30-minute gap on ES, right? Now, ES taps into a 15-minute gap right here. We get a tap into that 15-minute gap, and then we get a fat reaction out of there. Now we have these relative equal highs. However, ES already swept them out. So technically you could short this, right? You could technically short this, but that reaction out of that 15, I didn't really look for a short just because we bounced up so much. Then what ends up happening after that? We start to sell off, and now I'm confident in eyeing some sort of continuation here. However, we have an SMT inside this breaker. This breaker is still holding. We did not close below the breaker. It's still holding strong. we tap into this upper 5-minute candle or a 5-minute bearish gap, and we get a fat displacement candle to the downside, and this would be a decent shorting opportunity. You would have just got tagged in right there. But again, I just don't trust these moves today. This SMT at the low, ES had an SMT at the high, now it's having an SMT at the low. If the first SMT was really going to move us, then I don't think ES would have SMT'd at the lows. I would have wanted to see them correlated. I would have wanted to see ES be, moving lower as well, but we're not seeing that follow through. So I'm going to just let this run. Either this plays out and I can collect this data for later, or it doesn't play out and I can collect that data for later again. But yeah, man, no trades today. I'm going to be a lot more attentive moving into next week during market open. It looks like that's when a majority of our moves are occurring, is during the first 30 minutes of the session. And we usually never return to that move that gets made. For example, if we look at, let me go to, take me to 9:30 on this day. Right here, yesterday, what do we see happen? This moves down into a 15-minute gap, and then we continue higher. We never return to this, right? Same thing on Wednesday. We open, we manipulate these lows, and you could have longed into the bearish gap that was up here. And if you longed into that bearish gap, you could also short from that bearish gap, and we never returned to that whatsoever. Now, granted, this was FOMC, so we ended up getting news that takes us back over there. But literally by the end of New York AM session, we never ever returned over there. Same thing for Tuesday. Let's go to Tuesday. Tuesday, we tap into that. There was a 5-minute or 15-minute, and boom, we just start to sell off, and we never return to there during the entirety of New York AM session. And when we do, we just end up chopping around. Monday, same exact thing. We can go to Monday. Monday, we open, we manipulate lower, we get this closure above. This would have been a decent A+ loss. However, if you looked at true high time frame narrative, you'd know that we're rejecting out of this daily gap. So there's no reason to short. So you should not have taken this loss. You should have instead taken this manipulation into that 5-minute gap, where you could go lower off of this 1-minute inversion, and then you could just continue sending it lower. We, again, in the entirety of New York AM session, we never returned to this high. So with that being said, I think it's very obvious that that's what ends up happening a huge majority of the time, is that within the first 15 minutes of market open, we get that manipulation and we never return back to that high or low for the rest of at least New York AM session. So today, had you capitalized on that, you could have caught a nice 500 points. The only day where you could have potentially lost is maybe Tuesday, Monday, and Wednesday. Monday maybe alone, just on Monday, but those wins would counteract those losses by a huge amount. Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate, right? I wish I realized that sooner, and I wish I had the confidence to capitalize on that sooner. But now that I see it happen more and more often, I'm going to capitalize on it next week. I'm going to stay cash, keep my drawdown in check, keep my trades in check, and I think next week will be one of my best weeks in terms of trading. Maybe not in terms of profits and dollar sign, but probably in terms of trading. But yeah, that's about it. I'll see you guys next week on Monday, and I hope you guys had a better week than I did. And yeah, that's about it.